Ladies, gentlemen, and transgender people of planet Earth, my name is Mango Thunderslice, and today I'm going to be talking about climate change, and specifically why climate change is a function of the natural environment, and why President Trump was correct to withdraw the United States from the Paris Accord. And pretty much I'm going to, lay out some scientific perspectives to explain to you why climate change is not something that's generated by humans. And why there are many much more important environmental issues that we should be spending our attention on, those of us of the human race who care about, the biosphere and ecology, and basically making sure that we're not turning this planet into a garbage pit. It's come to the point where I just pretty much have to call it as I see it, that basically, I'm wearing this shirt again, science is greater than opinion, and, some of you might think it's a little ironic that somebody's here on YouTube wearing a t-shirt like that, speaking in front of a zodiac wheel, and proceeding to call everybody who's wah about global warming, aka climate change, is just pretty much a bandwagon jumping fruitcake at this point. And yes, as Mango Thunderslice calling people fruitcakes, I contradict myself very well, and I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes. For a little quote from Walt Whitman. So basically, a real roadmap of where I'm going to be going with this talk. The other environmental issues that really should be taking our attention for those of us who care about the planet. CO2 and the nature of the greenhouse effect, and also its interaction with solar energy input from the sun. Number 3, data manipulation. How the entire warming trend is basically an artifact of data manipulation perpetrated by NASA, NOAA, all these different reading stations. If you look at the raw data, it's a little different, but we'll get into that. Number 4, the economics of this supposed global warming fix, carbon tax, carbon credits, and the consequences of that. Number 5, intellectual hubris and people believing that they know more than they actually do. Which we all suffer from, including myself sometimes. And number 6, basically volcanoes, climate shifts, and the sun. Basically the electric universe perspective on the climate system, and what this planet has experienced and what it's likely to experience in the future as the climate continues to change. So, number 1, the environmental issues. I mean, right out the gate, Fukushima, right? We got hundreds of thousands of tons of radioactive water leaking into the Pacific Ocean every single day, and it's irradiating fish throughout the food chain in the Pacific Ocean. It's irradiating the plankton, it's irradiating the little fish and the big fish. As the bigger the fish, the more radioactive they are, because they are eating thousands and thousands of smaller fish, which are also irradiated. So this is something that, some people are talking about. Space Panther did a great video. It's our most popular video on our channel. Go check it out. How to deal with the consequences of Fukushima. Basically, this radiation plumes that are not only hitting the U.S. West Coast, but are going up over the Arctic Circle and actually hitting Europe at this point too, okay? Radiation is orders of magnitude more threatening to the entire biosphere and the planet than global warming, okay? Do you know how much planet Earth, do you know how much Gaia cares if this planet warms up because it's got more plant food in the atmosphere? She doesn't give a shit, okay? She'd love that. It'd turn this planet a little more into a jungle, okay? I work in the cannabis industry. We pump 1,200 parts per million of CO2 into those rooms to make the plants grow faster. As you increase the percentage of CO2 in the ambient atmosphere, the plants basically increase their metabolic activity, okay? So hypothetically, if we were to see CO2 go skyrocket to the moon, which objectively CO2 levels in the atmosphere has increased, it's still a trace gas measured in the parts per million, okay? But it has been increasing. But the point is that as the proportion of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increases, the biosphere, the plants, will actually increase their metabolic activity and increase their uptake of CO2. So, part of this, a real environmentalist perspective of the planet is not seeing Earth as this fragile glass vase that's ready to fall over and shatter because humans, made some cars and released some, hydrocarbons from inside the Earth. Gaia is stronger than that, okay? Planet Earth is stronger than that. It is a self-correcting system, not a parabolic shatter itself into a million pieces system, okay? When one factor in the equation gets out of line with the others, the system has mechanisms to recorrect, and it doesn't run with the carbon dioxide, okay? The carbon dioxide will get checked by other integers in the equation, and the equation in this case being the entire climate and the biosphere, basically the infinite equation, you know, the infinite equation of God. But not to get any religious with this, just the perspective that basically this universe is mysterious and everything is moving in its in one coherent flow. And it's very erroneous to suggest that because one factor goes out of line that the whole system is going to fall apart. Okay, environmental issues. China, okay, do you think the people walking through Beijing are concerned about the carbon dioxide? Okay, no, they're concerned about the sulfur dioxide and the nitrous oxide and all these basically truly harmful, you know, basically cancer-causing chemicals emitted from smog, and they're just breathing it all in, okay? There's plenty of poisonous chemicals being emitted from the burning of hydrocarbons. I agree with the transition to cleaner forms of energy, but I believe that entrepreneurship is the way to achieve that. I think that state programs are counterproductive at best and extremely harmful at worst. So that's basically with the environmental issues. There's bigger problems. Why are we focusing on plant food? Come on, guys. There's radiation in the friggin' ocean. You want to talk about plant food? Let's move on. Number 2, CO2 and solar flares, aka, you know, the whole science of, you know, the greenhouse effect theory. And yes, I'm saying the greenhouse effect is a theory because Bill Nye, with a glass cylinder of carbon dioxide and a lizard lamp, does not qualify as a true, accurate representation of the climate system. And if you think that, you have no right to call me unscientific or simple or stupid because you have an infant's idea of how this climate system works, and I'm not going to defend that. Basically, you know, the greenhouse effect is a theory based on the convective understanding of carbon dioxide, that basically carbon dioxide will trap heat within the Earth's atmosphere based on its thermal properties, how much, you know, it transfers thermal energy within the system. Okay, and that's just one perspective that is scientific with regard to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. For example, there are other perspectives, like, for example, when several years ago there was a major solar flare emitted from the sun, fired right at Earth, and it hit the atmosphere, and what they found was that carbon dioxide in a different nature of this same molecule actually reflected almost over 90% of the heat, the thermal energy from that solar blast. It reflected it back into space. Okay, so carbon dioxide is not just a simple molecule. You can't just assume because you saw a lizard lamp and a Bill Nye episode that you know everything about the climate, okay? Carbon dioxide, in response to its electromagnetic principles of the atmosphere, not just focusing on keeping heat in, but thermal energy from the sun in the form of electromagnetic emissions and charged particles hitting the Earth, carbon dioxide reflected the heat, okay? So in one sense it keeps heat in, convectively. In another sense it reflects heat back into space, you know, via basically electromagnetic principles during the solar flare, which was proven by NASA, okay? And this, of course, doesn't enter the mainstream equation with global warming. They just ignore it. You know, so that's basically it, that the greenhouse effect is a theory, it's not a fact, and that carbon dioxide has multiple aspects to it that basically interact with energy influxes in different ways. Okay, so that's moving on. Number 3, data manipulation. I mean, this is ridiculous, guys. This has been proven so many times over. It's all out there. I'm going to put links down below. But, I mean, if you look at the raw data from these climate monitoring stations, whether down in Paraguay, you know, all over the world, basically, and you look at the raw data, okay, there's no warming trend at all. What they did, they literally changed the data. They committed the ultimate fraud, the ultimate crime of science, which is manipulating your data to support your desired conclusion, which is exactly what the climate change crowd has been doing. They've been cherry picking their data. You go on NOAA's website, you know, every few months they put this stupid map up and it flies throughout Facebook convincing everybody that the world's about to end, and it's basically just a map of the world, and they've got some parts of it shaded blue and some parts of it shaded red to signify cooling and heating. Usually the whole friggin' map is lit up red, and so people look at this map like, oh my god, the map is red, we're all gonna die, you know, the computer model says we're all gonna die, so we're all gonna die, right? Yeah, because the computer models are always right. End sarcasm. Basically, there are also points in these maps that are gray, right? And it's kind of like they don't really explain it, you know. But if you actually, again, go back to the raw data and look like what the cooling or heating trend was in these gray areas, they're literally cutting out data of cooling all over the world. They just erase it from the map so that they can make it look more red than blue, and so they can send out their meme throughout Facebook, meh, global warming. It's a fraud. It's a total fraud. It's based on data manipulation. Again, I'll put links down below. You can check it out yourself. It's fake. The data has been manipulated. There's no warming trend. At the end of the 20th century, we had massive super solar maximum, whereby intense amounts of solar energy were coming into the planetary system, and as a result of that, there was a heating trend at the tail end of the 20th century for sure. And that super solar maximum has now subsided. Now the sun is going into a dormant period, and it's very likely, instead of a continued warming trend like we saw in the 20th century, we're going to actually see a little bit of the reverse and more of a cooling trend. But more importantly than the heating or the cooling is the change in precipitation patterns, okay? Because a little bit of cooling, a little bit of heating, but a change in precipitation patterns can wipe out whole civilizations, and it has multiple times throughout history. If the area where you grow hundreds of millions of tons of food all of a sudden isn't getting rain anymore, what happens to that civilization? All of a sudden their food production tanks. They've built a population of hundreds of millions, billions even, basically by using these food production in these, beneficial conditions. And then when the food gets cut out, what do you think happens? Is people start fighting each other for food. And that's, if you look at when the sun's energy has downturned throughout history, it usually corresponds with the falling of Chinese dynasties and like the collapse of civilizations. And usually that's been in response to cold, okay? Global warming throughout history has been a very good thing. And, it's really the cold that wipes out civilizations, and specifically the precipitation trends. So those are the things to be keeping your eye on. And I'll put some links to YouTube channels down below that are really great at covering this. But there's way more things than just heat or cold, okay? There's water, okay? There's how we grow food and just the patterns, by which we live. Will be changing in response to the climate. That will continue to change regardless of carbon dioxide's concentration in the atmosphere. Moving on to number 4, economics of the carbon tax, carbon credits. It's a total scam. They want to create a new bullshit financial derivatives market. They want to have some countries basically, it's not going to reduce carbon in the first place anyway. All it's going to do is all the people that produce a whole bunch of emissions are just going to buy these credits, right? And then they're going to securitize them, and they're going to make all sorts of debt instruments, and on Wall Street they'll be betting on carbon credits. And meanwhile, the planet doesn't get any better. It just creates this new funny money, a system for, a bunch of already super rich people to get even more rich. And, ultimately it has nothing to do with building more solar panels, riding more bikes, changing our fuel consumptions, organic gardening. Carbon tax doesn't do any of that. It literally provides, only the barest incentive to increase those activities, but it provides a major incentive for a whole new fraudulent financial market based off of nothing. So, ultimately, all this freaking money, like, what's his name? Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, just said he's, basically New York's committed to climate change, and, Bloomberg is coming out rallying all the blue states to fight against climate change and sign on to the Paris Accord. Here's the thing, is that I remember when the Paris Accord was signed, and all the hardcore environmentalists were like, this deal is bullshit, it means nothing, it's non-binding, it doesn't have any actual mechanisms to reduce carbon, it's just basically, this wealth redistribution scheme. And that's absolutely valid. And now, of course, Trump wants to withdraw the United States from it, and people are like, oh my god, the planet's gonna explode, we're all gonna die, don't you love your children? It's like, come on. First of all, even if you accept the premise of anthropogenic global warming and that humans are so evil and killing the planet, blah, 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 even if you accept that's real, the Paris Accord is a political document. It has nothing to do with actually responding to anthropogenic global warming. How many political documents have you seen throughout history that actually solved a problem, okay? You might be tempted to respond the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but as far as I'm concerned, I agree with George Bush, and it's just a goddamn piece of paper that doesn't hold back people of ruthless intent, okay? What holds back people of ruthless intent is other people of ruthless intent with more benevolent aims, and that is very key to what's going on this planet on a social sense. So that's moving on. Economics of carbon credits, carbon tax, bunch of baloney, not worth the ink on the paper that it's usually printed on. Intellectual hubris, number 5, is basically, okay, like I said, lobbed an insult at the beginning, a bunch of bandwagon jumping fruitcakes who are pretending to be scientists. I like to call them the cheerleaders of science, because they're not really scientists. They might have taken a high school or college class in some sciences. They might have even majored in some science in college. But you know what? I went to college too, and I took plenty of AP, science classes, and I like to think that I have a very scientific perspective of the world. Many of you might disagree, but the fact is, I was a global warming alarmist back in high school, okay? So for those of you that want to explain to me how my ideas are so simplistic, I already know the other side, okay? Spare me. Spare me the simplistic jargon of the global warming myth, all right? Because I already know it. What happened was that I came into possession of new information and new perspectives. And what I did with that, being intellectually honest with myself and genuinely curious about the environmental problems that we face as a species, is that I changed my position in response to new information. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's like a fucking superpower at this point. To change your mind in response to new information, oh my God. But again, I'm going to put the links down below. The data's been manipulated to show a warming trend. Carbon dioxide is a trace gas that does not lead the climate. Climate leads carbon dioxide, because basically when it's warmer on the planet, there's more plants growing. The plants and the animals also basically increase the metabolic exchange of carbon dioxide as they breathe it back and forth. Okay, so thermal energy is the leading indicator, not carbon dioxide. This whole Al Gore, inconvenient truth thing was a total scam. And I admit, I fell for it. But you know what? Being intellectually honest with myself, when I came into information that showed me that he was wrong, I changed my position. And that's basically what I'm here today, not to make fun of people, just to let you know that you don't understand everything about the whole friggin' universe just because you took a freaking science class and your professor told you this or that. How much time does a professor spend actually doing experiments these days? Versus how much time do they spend just reading from the textbook, reading this or that, or what somebody else has written? How many people are doing experiments? How many people are doing real shit? This is computer models versus computer models. Where's the experiments? And that leads me into my last point today, which is the electric universe guys, the plasma cosmologists, who actually have rational, understandable perspectives on this, and you don't have to go into Einsteinian and, anthropogenic global warming, mysticism to really explain what's going on with the climate and what are the prime drivers, what are the integers that actually control the climate system, and it comes back to the sun, okay? To cap it off, the reason that the IPCC models are wrong, the anthropogenic global warming models are wrong, is because they reduce the solar input on the climate to one variable, which they call total solar irradiance, TSI. And total solar irradiance, the convective, thermal energy emitted from the sun is not changing very much over time. It's virtually a flat line, just like they represent it on their little global warming websites. But that integer is 100% inadequate. It is totally worthless as a representative indicator of the sun's input on the climate. And the reason for that is that the sun has an intense electromagnetic personality, okay? It has a positive field and a negative field, and they're constantly flipping, basically on average every 11 years. And as these fields flip, there are sort of holes in the electromagnetic field of the sun, and out of these coronal holes, the corona of the sun have holes in them. Massive levels of protons, of charged particles, fly out of these holes and come flying throughout the solar system, okay? All of the planets are bathed in this electromagnetic plasma generated by the sun, okay? And every once in a while, there's a blast of energy that gets sent our way, and it's an influx of energy into the system. It usually leads to heating, okay? Throughout history, we can associate these times of high solar activity. Not necessarily just sunspots, okay? It's more than just sunspots. There's plenty of people that try and debunk this perspective by, counting just sunspots. But there's more than that. And what you do when you actually look at the electromagnetic peaks and troughs of the sun's electromagnetic outputs, and you line that up with the climate, not just the climate as far as heating and rain and all that, but earthquakes and volcanoes, the energy input from the sun is absolutely 110% the prime indicator and driver of climate on this planet. And that's provable beyond any shadow of a doubt for those who are actually paying attention and following their genuine curiosity. So that's it today, basically. Follow the links down below. This is a message of respect. I do not believe that my perspective is unscientific. I hope you take this perspective, basically with a little bit of humility, and just understand that none of us know the whole truth, okay? Just because somebody told you that 97% of scientists agree, which, even if it was true, is still an opinion poll, okay? Science is greater than opinion. Polling a bunch of scientists is not science, okay? And first of all, they didn't poll, they polled scientists and then they cherry-picked the data with that too to make it look like the overwhelming majority are on board. There's so many thousands and thousands of scientists. The founder of the freaking Weather Channel is calling it out. I mean, there's physicists and climatologists and meteorologists and all sorts of people coming out, interdisciplinary consensus, contravening this 97% bullshit. They basically say, no, the sun is the prime driver of the climate, that we have not experienced warming since the peak of the last warming cycle at the end of the 20th century at 1998. It's been flatline and even a little bit down. Okay, and we're going into a period of lower solar activity, and it's likely that the climate is going to keep changing, and really fast, especially in the later part of this year, going into 2018 and 2019. It's going to basically, it's projected along these electromagnetic models of the sun that the climate change is going to increase real big time, okay? Bigly, as Trump would say. And, it's just important that we prepare for the full spectrum of climate shifts, to be resilient, okay? To know where your food comes from, grow it if possible, right? To not rely on the industrial system of petrochemicals, basically. We're all going to be using the market system. We're all going to buy and sell things that we can't make ourselves. But the point is to strive as much as you can to be resilient. And when you're resilient, you don't generate a lot of carbon dioxide anyway. Meanwhile, Michael Bloomberg and Bill de Blasio are going to be flying their private jets to some bullshit conference, spend $15 million on high-priced, $300 steaks. Meanwhile, if they spent $15 million on some freaking solar panels for New York City, they wouldn't even have to have a freaking conference, okay? So it's just a bunch, these guys are all jackasses pretending to care about the planet, and I'm calling it out. You guys are freaking frauds. Science says that global warming's a myth, and science says that climate change is not a myth, but it's gonna keep going, and for totally different reasons than carbon dioxide. So again, be prepared, be aware, care about the earth, but don't get lulled into bullshit that the media tells you. And, that's a full spectrum wisdom, truism at this point. So, wholeness and balanced vibrations, my brothers and sisters. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.